good morning, and welcome back to day 2 of our cozy wrap sew along. Today we'll be sewing the shoulder seams and then we'll be sewing the side seams. So pretty easy day. Some of the work will be done on my serger, some will be done with the sewing machine. But for the shoulder seams, we will definitely be using the serger, or at least I am. If you prefer to do the whole project on your sewing machine, you can definitely do that as well. Just make sure you use a stretch stitch. Lay your back pattern piece right side up, and then lay your front pattern pieces right side down, so this way the right sides together, matching at the shoulder seam, and make sure that the sleeves are on the outside. This pattern follows a 1/2 inch seam allowance, so we're going to be sewing this with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. If you're doing the duster length, or I mean the midi or the duster length, you can add some clear elastic in the seam to compensate for the weight of the fabric. I'm doing just the tunic, so there is definitely no need. Okay, so we're going to repeat the same thing for the other side. The shoulder seams are done. Now we're going to be working on the side seams, and for the side seams you want to place them right sides together, and you will see your notches matching the one that we added yesterday. So we have 2 notches where we have the belt opening, and then we have 2 notches where we have the side seam. So now we're going to have to mark approximately 1 inch on each side, like so. So this is my pattern, this is my shirt, well, tunic length with the notches. This is the bottom notch, the side split notch, and these are the 2 notches for the belt. So now we want to put 2 more clips here. One will be 1 inch away on each side, about 1 inch. I'm eyeballing it, and another inch away from this side, and then on the top, so towards the shoulder, on the bottom side split, 1 more inch. Because I'm doing this because I'm sewing with my serger and my sewing machine. If you're using just your sewing machine, you can do the whole thing without doing all these measurements. But because I prefer to use my serger, I'm going to do this right now. So I'll stitch up until here with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Actually, before I do that, I do need to make some snips. So I might be better off just starting sewing with the sewing machine part first. Because you will need to stitch with the sewing machine from your so the 1 inch away to the notch. So from the 1 inch mark to the notch with the sewing machine, then from the notch to the, as you go down on the side seam, then from the notch to the 1 inch, and then the same thing here from the notch down with the sewing machine. So I'm going to turn to the sewing machine right now and do these stitches, but before that let me just mark it on the other side as well, so I don't have to go back and forth. So I'm laying my pieces right sides together, matching the notches. So This is the side, this is the bottom. So I'll do 1 inch right here. Because this is a brushed fabric, it tends to stick to itself, so it definitely helps with this project because it's not shifting. Like once I put it this way, it's gonna stay this way. And then 1 inch here, and 1 inch above this place. So I'm going to take this to the sewing machine and stitch like I said, 1 inch here, then 1 inch here, and then 1 inch here on both sides. So we're back to the sewing machine. Let's do those stitches on both sides. Make sure that you follow the 1/2 inch seam allowance included in this pattern. And you top stitch at the beginning and at the end of your stitch. And then I'm starting at the notch. And going down 1 inch. Same thing on the bottom, 1 inch above the side split notch. And then we'll do the same thing on the other side. Above the top marking for the waist tie. And then 1 inch from the waist down to the bottom marking. Judy has started to include videos with her tutorials. So there are if you're choosing a different option than I am, most likely you'll find it throughout the links that are included in the video, in the pattern. Okay, so we have done that. Now we're going to need to do some snips. So we'll be snipping 1/2 inch above each marking. Like 1/2 inch above the bottom marking. Make sure that you don't snip your stitches. So my stitch is right here, so I'm doing a snip right here. And then I'm going to do a snip right here, about 1/2 inch below the bottom, and then 1/2 inch on top of the bottom of the top marking, and the same thing for the other side. And I'm going to see if I can reverse the steps right now and just do the top stitching while I'm at the sewing machine before we move back to the serger to finish today's steps. Careful not to snip your thread. Okay. Was it above or below? Okay. So for the bottom split, you want to open up where you did your split right now and press 1/2 inch on each side. and using either your cover stitch or just your sewing machine. You're using knit, so it's not going to unravel. You're going to stitch a little box to basically top stitch the side split. And doing those snips definitely helps to make sure that it lays nice and flat. And I'll show you. And of course you'll be pressing this afterwards. So this is one bottom side seam. See how nicely it looks? And this is what we've stitched right now. So now you're going to go ahead and do the top stitching on your opening. So you know where you did the snips at the tie, you just open the hem allowance on both sides, you give it a good press, and then you top stitch it. Just a rectangle along that tie opening. That's why we did those 1/2 inch snips, so it lays nice and flat. Optionally, you can finish that raw edge with a serger, but I don't see why it would be necessary. It's going to be on the inside, nobody will see it. It's also knit, so it will not unravel. I wouldn't really worry about it. Okay, so one side is finished. This is the opening for the belt. See how pretty it looks now? Nice and flat. And then we'll finish the side seams with the serger. But let me do the other side first. So let's start with the belt opening. I am pressing the seam allowance on both sides. And I'm going to sew. This time I'm sewing from the right side. It doesn't really matter because my bobbin and top thread match. If they don't, make sure that you sew with whatever colored thread you want on the outside. I'm just sewing a rectangle along the press openings. So this is how it looks like for the belt on the other side. You can see it here. Can you? Yes. Okay, so now we'll do the hem. Again, press open where you did your snips and press wrong sides together a 1/2 inch hem on both sides and then top stitch. Gorgeous. And I do believe that this is the last step we're doing on the sewing machine that requires a sewing machine. The rest will be done on the serger, at least on my end. So this is the side seam. The front is shorter than the back. and we've sewn this rectangle. Perfect. Now we're going to go back to the serger and finish the side seams. We are back to the beloved serger. So right now we're just going to finish the openings on the side seams that we left unsewn. So with the right sides together, I'm going to start from the sleeve and go to where we did the initial snip. And I'm sewing half an inch. And because we did that snip at the half an inch mark, it will end nicely. Right there. I'll show you a close-up. So this is from the top down, and this is the opening. See, because we did that snip, it ends really pretty here. So same thing, I'm going to start for the other part missing from the snip. See, this is a half an inch on each side. I'm going to sew right here with a half an inch seam allowance. So having that snip helps this line be very nice and neat and straight. And I just like to tie the ends if that, but it doesn't really matter. So this is how it looks like on the bottom. After we've sewn with this on the side seam, after we've sewn with the serger and the, see, this is the serger part, and this is the hemmed part, and this is the belt opening right here as a close-up. And I'm going to go ahead and repeat the same thing on the other side. This is it for today. So when you finish stitching today's steps, snap a picture of your progress and post it in the day 2 comments of the Sew Along album. You can find the album in the Patterns for Pirates and Made for Mermaids Sew Along group on Facebook. It is linked in the blog if you're not there already, because we'll be picking the winners from those entries. So make sure that you mark your progress there all the time in the appropriate album. So this is the side seam already sewn, your belt opening and your side split. It looks beautiful, neat. Tomorrow we'll be adding the bottom bands on the front and the back. I will see you back here soon. Bye!